to know. Oh, yeah, we need to show. Listen, watch, and flow. You need to.
I need to know, I need to know, I need to know. You, as person, as individual, you need to know, you need to know, you need to know. As a group, we all need to know. What do we need to know? What do I need to know? What do you need to know? Many a times, people are taking the book of Deuteronomy 20:16 to 17 out of context, thinking that God supports genocide. No. But let's look at the Bible. What is the Bible saying? The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20, verse 16 to 17. Bible says, but of the cities of these people, which the Lord thy God doth give thee for an inheritance, thou shalt save alive nothing that breatheth, but thou shalt utterly destroy them, namely the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord thy God had commanded thee. So what is the Bible interpretation or the hermeneutical interpretation of this verse? So historically, context, that is the historical context, the author, traditionally Moses, that is addressing Israel before they enter into the promised land. So the settings of this verse is all about Israel stand on the edge. They stand on the edge of Canaan after the wilderness journey for 40 years. So Moses is giving them final instruction in his far west sermon, that is the Deuteronomy, that is the second law. So he's telling them what they need to do when they got to that place. So the audience, the new generation of Israelites who will take possession of the land. So the situation at hand is about instructions for warfare. Instruction for warfare, distinguishing between distant nation and Canaanite nation who were under God's judgment. The Canaanite nation were under God's judgment. So what is the literary context? Deuteronomy 20 gives law of warfare. Cities are far away, that is, offer peace. Cities that are very far away from them, they offer peace. If rejected, besiege, but spare people, according to the book of Deuteronomy 10 to 15. City of Canaan, no survival to be spared. That is, everybody must, they must not be, let them be alive. That's what God said there. So the difference shows this was not a general rule, because he spared some people and he did not spare some people. That means it's not a general rule for warfare, but a unique theoretical, that is a theocratic judgment. That judgment is a theocratic judgment on the nations of Canaan. So what are the key words that you must be able to understand for you to interpret the Bible verse correctly? Utterly destroy. Utterly destroy in Hebrew means haram. Haram, that is to devote. Haram means to devote to instruction. Devote to instruction. Set apart an offering to God's true judgment. You set apart offering unto God through judgment. Save alive nothing that bread. That is, save alive nothing that bread. That means a total remover. A total remover, leaving no survivor. So commanded, that is, commanded means server, means a divine directive, not human intervention. A divine directive from God, not human. So what is the meaning of this passage? The verse reflects, Deuteronomy 20:16 to 17 reflects God's judgment on Canaan nation for their entrenchment. That is, entrenchment, they entrench into idolatry, into morality and child sacrifice. They even sacrifice children in the city of Canaan. And God have to brought judgment upon them. When you study the book of Leviticus, chapter 18, 20 to 25. Also, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 9, verse 4 to 5. You see how they are entrenched into idolatry, into moralities, and into child sacrifice, which is against the law of God. So Israel now, God is using Israel as an instrument of judgment. God is using Israel as an instrument of judgment, not acting out of ethnic hatred, but fulfilling divine justice. So the command that God gave them to totally people that are there, they must be anything that is breathing, they must not spare them alive. What God is now saying, the command also serve to protect Israel from idolatry, so that when they get to that land, they will not mingle and be practicing what those things are practicing. If this nation remain, they will lead Israel into sin. So what is the significance of this Bible verse? God's holiness, God's holiness, God's holiness and justice. Sin has consequences. God's patience with Canaanite has limits. He already limits. So that's what they say. There's a limit to human endurance. When you read the book of Genesis chapter 15, 16. So God has been patient with them, but they are not ready to change. So God covenant faithfulness. This was tied to his promise to the land. The promise God promised Abraham that he's going to give that land to his descendant. So typology. What is the typology there? The conquest prefigure final judgment. God will ultimately remove all evil in the last day. So Christological lens. In the New Testament, the holy war shifts from physical enemies to spiritual forces. According to the book of Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12, it says we are not fighting with flesh and blood. So what are the common interpretations of this verse that people misinterpret? God will support genocide, God support this. No, genocide for all times. No. Some misread this as God endorsing genocide universally. In truth, this was a unique one-time command tied to God's covenant and the specific sins of the Canaanites. Ethnic cleansing. Some people say it's ethnic cleansing. No, the issue was not ethnically, but idolatry and rebellious against God. Rahab, a Canaanite, and her family was spared by faith. Joshua, when you read the book of Joshua chapter 2, Hebrew 11:31, those people, they abide by the rules and the regulation of God, and they were saved. But those that do not abide by the rules and regulation of God, they were not saved. Human cruelty. Israel did not invent this. It was a direct command of God's justice. So how do you apply this place today? How do you now read it? How do you apply it? How do you use the lens of God to see it? So take sin seriously. That place is telling you to take sin seriously. Just as Israel was to remove Canaanite practices, Christians are called to push sin to death. That is the book of Colossians chapter 3 verse 6. So you must run away from sin. If you want to be holy, you want to be alive, run away from sin. Take sin seriously. Spiritual warfare. In spiritual warfare, our battle is no longer with flesh and blood, but against sin, that is Satan, and a spiritual stronghold. God's justice and mercy. God, justice and mercy. God is patient, but will ultimately judge evil. Yet his mercy extends to those who repent. Rahab repented, even though she was an harlot. Avoid compromise. No matter who you are, avoid compromise. Just as Israel was warned against mixing with Canaanite idolatry, believers must guard against bleeding faith. That is, you blend your faith with worldly value. So in summary, that place, the book of Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 16 to 17, record God's unique command for Israel to devote the Canaanite nation to destruction as an act of divine judgment. And covenant faithfulness, it highlights God's holiness, justice, and the danger of idolatry, while pointing towards the greater spiritual battle believers are facing today. So this is not a place that supports genocide, but it's just a typology of the warfare that we must be able to fight and conquer. God bless you. God be with you. For tomorrow, we bring another verse and the interpretation. Shalom.